Hey everyone, welcome to Can We Get Back to Politics podcast with Cece and
Meredith. And so this first episode, we're going to be focusing on how social media impacts politics. And overall, our podcast is, as you can tell from the name, about politics. But me and Cece are high schoolers, and we're doing this for school, but also because we love learning about politics. And we also did background research before this, so a lot of this is going to be opinionated, but some of this also is going to be facts. Okay, to start things off, what kind of got you interested in this topic?
well, Meredith, I think that politics in general is always very interesting and has always been interesting to me. I think part of that is probably how it's a controversial topic and everyone has different opinions. I'm really interested in hearing people's different opinions because I think it gives me like a good idea of like what's going on in the world, because like different people's opinions reflect like different points of view, which I really value. And also I just think that like politics are something that are important to me personally because like I really care about, like, for example, like the presidential election, who's running this country. I think I have personal strong feelings about it, and I just think it's important that people are like educated correctly and they're not getting like misinformation, but they're doing real research, and I think that's important, and that's why I'm doing this. And you, Meredith, how did you get interested in this topic?
So I think what got me mostly interested is, last year, my sister is very into politics, and my parents both have strong opinions that are also different from my grandparents, and it's just like, I never really got interested in, or I never joined in on their conversations about it, and now I do get involved in them because I've done my research, and last year I was like, I need to do my own research and not just base my opinion off of what my parents or grandparents are saying, and I need to like find my own opinion. And so I did research, and also I think after Biden dropped out of the election is kind of what sparked like my need to like learn more about it. Just because I heard so many people talking about it, there was so much on my social media pages, and I was like, I need to get real information. And I also just think it's super important for everyone to educate themselves on politics, because one day, like for us, we can't vote now, but one day we are going to be able to vote, and we need to be educated on who we're voting for, what's happening, and you need to now, even though there's no like presidential election that we're voting for. Like, I just think it's super important, because when you get to the age where you can vote, or if you're already at the age where you can vote, you can't just go vote and be like, oh, I know a couple things about this guy or girl, and just like not be educated on it. But I think everyone should vote, and I really think that your opinion matters, so you should go out and vote, but you need to be educated for that also.
I agree. I think that's really important. And just to add on one more thing, I also think the idea of respecting each other's opinions and not judging others' opinions, like everyone is allowed to disagree. I think that's what makes it so great, is that everyone truly has a different opinion. Like, no person's opinion is the exact same as another's, and I think that it's very important to allow for that and allow for there to be differences of opinions, because it's important that everyone is able to use their voice and voice their opinion. And I just think that it's important that people respect each other's opinion. Like I said, like, you're allowed to disagree, but I just think it's so unproductive to be judgmental towards people.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I also think that disagreeing, like you said, it's super important. And I also think it's super important to listen to the other person's opinion, because you might not agree with it. And honestly, sometimes I will be like, oh, why do they think that? Like, that's honestly insane.
I agree.
But at the same time, you kind of have to like respect it, and you can't like judge them as a person and be like, oh, they're like genuinely. I think there's to a point where you can be like, you can think in your head, oh, they're a horrible person, but you can't treat them in a horrible way.
I agree.
As to that, you have to listen to them first, because they might say something right out of the bat and you're like, oh, that's insane, but you might listen to it more and understand a little bit more from their point of view, and you still don't have to agree with it. It's just like you have to kind of listen.
I completely agree. It's important to hear a person out, and you can, like, I'm not saying that you can't think that their opinions are awful, but like you said, you can't think that they're an awful person for thinking those opinions, because truly everyone has a right to their own opinion, and it's good to disagree, it's good to have differences in opinion, but everyone should be able to respect each other's opinions and have these discussions in a respectful way. Okay, so now for our first episode, we're going to be talking about, first, the presidential election. So, Meredith, how do you feel about how TikTok impacted the presidential election for both parties?
So I think a lot of it was TikTok in general, and the mainstream media is also super, I mean, you could really post anything on the internet at this point, and so much of it is like not real facts, and people will look at a TikTok and it'll be like so like impactful to what they want, and they don't fact check it, and so they kind of just have those emotions going on already, and they don't look at the background facts. And I think that's a really bad thing that social media like creates, kind of. And I think also the thing is that I also think it can be a good outlet, because you can talk about anything on the internet, so you'll find other people who have the same opinions as you, and you can find some information. But really, social media, I think a lot of people in the Gen Z generation, in our generation, really get a lot of their facts off of social media, which is horrible, because I mean, it's obviously not informational at all.
Yeah, I think that social media can cause a lot of information to be misconstrued, and people can like get a lot of false information on there, especially because like you can post whatever you want, and that's why I think it's so important to get reliable sources where it's like real, raw research, and data, not stuff that people have just typed out and put out there. And you know, Meredith, one thing I found on GMF is that Kamala Harris joined TikTok on July 25th, 2024, and within the first 16 hours, she gained 5.5 million followers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just like a notable example of how social media can really contribute to like politics, specifically the election, because I think this presidential election, we can both agree, like both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris had very big TikTok followings, and both very big presences on social media, specifically TikTok. I think like what was interesting to me was Kamala Harris's like connection with her campaign to Brat. I think that was a very strategic move to like connect it to something where especially like sort of the young demographic of TikTok is very interested in. That was like a very popular trend at the time, and I think that there's smart ways that social media can be incorporated into people's campaigns in the election, but then there's also some cons to it.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying about all of those points about Kamala and Trump and stuff. And I found an article from the Journal of Social Media and Society, and it kind of just pinpoints mostly on TikTok and how it really influences politics. And it says, prior research on mass media suggests that TikTok has the potential to influence political attitudes and behaviors. I think that's just, like, there's literally facts that you can be so influenced by TikTok and the media about politics. And I think if you see one really strong video about a certain political figure, you're like, oh wow, they're such a powerful person, like this is amazing, I'm gonna go vote for them. But it's like you have to kind of do your research, and I think if you see one thing that could be not informational, like not a fact, and you don't do your research on it, you could start finding facts that back that wrong thing up, and you're just like, oh my god, like, this is amazing, whatever, and you're just like, this, like, I don't know, but I just think it's really bad that it spreads so much misinformation.
Completely agree with you, Meredith, and I think one thing that I sort of see is that people see like one thing on TikTok and sort of like about like a political figure, like the best example would be obviously the 2024 election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. People will see one thing on TikTok and take it and run with it, and then like they're just not considering all aspects of the election. Like, so much goes into it. It's not just like one, like, it's just like there's so many things to take into consideration, and I think especially kids our age, we don't know everything that needs to be taken into consideration because we're not adults, we're not taxpayers, we're not any of that, we don't have jobs. So like I think that it's important to like not just draw your focus to one side of like the election, like one specific issue. Like, I think it's important to consider all aspects.
Yeah, I totally agree.
A person's campaign.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what I was saying before, if you find one TikTok and you're like, this is an amazing piece of information, like this is an amazing law they're putting in place, first of all, you don't know if they're promising that. You don't know if they're promising that law.
Yeah.
And you have to go do your research, and you might see it and it's named as something you're like, oh, this is amazing. But when you research it, it could be something that you totally don't agree with. But I think people, when they find something like that, they try and find the information to back it up. And it might not be correct information, but when they see one thing that backs that up, they go with it along. And
I agree.
I think it's honestly like crazy how social media can really affect this. And yeah, go ahead.
I agree, and I think just quickly adding on is I think that something that people who get their information from social media, something they lack is critical thinking. And like you said, like they'll find something on TikTok and then they'll like desperately be searching for something to back it up, and as soon as they find one other source that backs it up, they take it and run with it. But they haven't even thought like the other way, like, oh, what if this is not credible? What if this is not true? Like, let me find stuff to disprove it. They just want to like take what they see and go with it. But I mean, honestly, if it's from like social media, there's a big chance that it's not necessarily 100% true.
Also, a little, well, not really off topic, but on TikTok, especially during the election, my whole page was politics basically. And also, after the election especially, I was scrolling on TikTok and I would always see these lives of these younger Democrats or liberals going on live and debating like older Republicans, and they would just keep joining in on the live, like these random people, they would just join their TikTok live, and I would watch them for a while, and it was just so interesting because I think honestly some of the younger liberals were more mature than others, but honestly, I think that sometimes they just wouldn't listen to each other really, and I think that really shows how the two parties are really disconnected. And I think it was kind of disrespectful because even though they didn't agree with their opinions, they would start getting a little bratty about it, and they would start getting kind of mean about it. And I think also the Republicans like who were joining the live, I also think the Republicans who were joining the live were disrespectful also. But there was also some times when a more mature liberal was debating a more mature Republican, and it was really nice to listen to because they were actually listening to each other. But when someone has such a strong opinion and they just keep going on it, they start interrupting people and going off those facts, and then they'll start spreading misinformation also because sometimes they don't do enough research because they kind of just start blabbering, which is honestly valid. Like, I think when you're just talking so much, you might accidentally say something false, but it was just really interesting to see those kinds of things because I think if you clicked on those lives, I also saw sometimes on my feed when it was like Republicans, like the live that they were hosting, and they would have liberals join. But these Republicans, like, I think it's just really interesting to what your algorithm on TikTok is because they were two very different things, and I just think it's really interesting.
Well, Meredith, bouncing off what you just said about how a lot of people tend to get their they sort of gain their opinions from TikTok, and through like all those TikToks that Harris and Trump used in their campaigns. I think that they also I found an interesting statistic from Pew Research about how young adults use TikTok to keep up with politics and get news, and I think it's upsetting that TikTok is a lot of people's main source of information, because obviously TikTok is not a trustworthy source or a reliable source.
It really spreads a lot of misinformation.
Spreads a lot of misinformation. And 36% of total TikTok users say that they keep up with politics or political issues with TikTok. And that's 48% of TikTok users that are from ages 18 to 29, and so on and so forth. The numbers get smaller as the ages go up, but
they're still
pretty
big numbers.
Like 65-plus-year-olds, 24% of 65-plus-year-olds on TikTok use TikTok to get information on current events and politics and political issues. I just think that's insane, like especially for the older generations, like how TikTok is being used as a reliable source when it should not be treated as such at all. I do not think that any form of social media is a good place to get information from. I think it should be from news sources, true like research. You should check the credibility of all your sources, and I just think that's very important because of all the misinformation that gets shown on social media. So I just thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's honestly like insane that that many people get their news information off of TikTok, and these are all people who can vote. So, I mean, they probably all voted this election. Mm-hmm. And knowing that a lot of TikTok viewers, I guess, get their information off of TikTok. And I just think that that's a horrible way to get your information. Mm-hmm. But I think people are just lazy these days. And I mean, so am I. I'm a really lazy person, but I still take the time to like look at the news. Yeah. And I also I can't vote. So yeah. I mean, if I were voting, I would do way more research than I have been doing. But the fact that we can't even vote and we probably know more information from sourced places than people who can vote is honestly insane. Mm-hmm. And I really think, like, you'll find news, like, accounts that are verified, like Fox or NBC, on TikTok, and they're really just showing, like, facts, like, current events and stuff. But also during the election, there was all of the candidates on there, and I think that, like, they would be making TikToks for their viewers to like and for them to get roped into their accounts and start watching more, and you'll see all of this misinformation because those candidates aren't really giving out research. Those candidates are giving out like things so that you will vote for them. So they just make themselves seem like the better person. And I mean, obviously you can like that person, but you kind of have to see both sides or look up more facts about the person, because they'll just make themselves a lovable person on social media, but they might not be in real life.
That's very true, and I think that goes back to the idea that social media is fake, and you really can't trust anything you see on there. So thank you, Meredith. I really agree with all your points there.
Thank you so much for listening to me and Cece's podcast. We're super excited to start this journey, and we're super new to this, so we're kind of learning, so yeah. But we're planning on coming out with a new podcast every 2 weeks or so, and our next podcast episode is going to be about youth and politics. Thank you so much for listening, and also you can follow us on Instagram at Can We Get Back to Politics. Thank you.